Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hi friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Jeff New, retiring president of Mid-City Supply based in Elkhart, Indiana. Mid-City is a third-generation plumbing and HVAC distributor with several locations in the region. Jeff is one of those guys who has immersed himself not only in his company, but the industry in general. As he is set to retire this year and hand control over to his two sons, he shares that it is the professional relationships in the industry that have helped him weather the ups and downs of the past 40 years. It was a pleasure to catch up with him, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSequel Distribution Software. InSequel is a fully functional distribution-based software package. I only recommend software packages that were purpose-built to serve distribution, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. Economy doesn't mean compromise. This company is on the cutting edge of distribution-friendly applications like VMI on mobile devices, mobile signature capture, mobile CRM, warehouse management software, and e-commerce development. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSequel Distribution Software at www.insequel.com. That's INXSQL. Well, hey, Jeff, welcome to Distribution Talk. So glad you were able to make the time.
Thanks, Jason. Happy to participate and share some of my experiences with you and others in the industry.
Yeah, I think it's kind of fun, to look back, especially if you've been in the business for a while. It's kind of fun to look back and figure out, well, how did I get here and why am I still involved? What was the attraction? So I think, I've always enjoyed that about the show is talking about, the history. So if you wouldn't mind, could you share a little bit about your history, how you got involved with the company and those types of things?
Happy to do that. So I grew up in the industry. My father started the company, and I started working, when I was in fourth grade. I think it was 10 years old. I started working on Saturday morning, like many of us in this industry, sweeping floors, doing inventory. I can remember doing inventory. They gave me all the flare fittings and compression fittings to count. It stuck me back in a corner. I counted all those things. And, eventually I started filling orders and doing all that stuff. And worked during the summers in high school, summers in college, and attended Indiana University. Go Hoosiers!
Nice.
Studied business, and really, said I wanted to make it on my own. I didn't want to go to work for my dad. And my senior year, when I started going through all the interview processes, I just came to the realization that this is a pretty good gig that I got going.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, graduated, wasn't ready to come back to Elkhart yet. Moved to Indianapolis with my roommate was moving to Indianapolis. Moved there. Just so happened my girlfriend, now wife of 45 years, lived in Indianapolis, and so stayed there for a year. Went out on the street looking for a job, and it landed at Lee Supply. They were just amazed that this kid graduated from Indiana University Business School and knew something about the plumbing wholesale business. And went to work for them, for almost a year. And then we got married and we moved back to Elkhart and went to work for the company. And at the time, my dad had retired and we were part of Bristol Products. My dad had retired, and a guy by the name of Floyd Catterlin was the president of the Mid-City division of Bristol Products. So I came in as a salesman, was on the road for a couple of years, then became sales manager, marketing manager. And then 3 years later, Bristol decided they wanted to sell off Mid-City. So my dad and I bought it back. That was in 1979, and I've been running it ever since. We started out with one location and about 35 or 40 employees. Now we have 9 locations and 130 associates. It's been very interesting. My first year, 1979, for those of you who were alive back then, we borrowed a lot of money to buy the business from Bristol. And Prime, when we purchased it, was at 12. And and we said, well, okay, it might go a little higher. Well, it went to 21.
Ooh. Oh man.
and we were highly in debt. So my
Yeah.
first year of running this company, I took my father's company, which had never had a losing year. They were always profitable, even in the first year. I took this very profitable company, and in the first year, we lost $180,000. And I thought I was a complete failure. The second year was better. We only lost about 100,000, a big improvement. And then the recession ended, interest rates came back down, and we started making money, and we've been profitable almost every year since. So yeah, it was a real education. I spent 4 years in college, and I think I learned more in the first 9 months of running a business than I did in 4 years of college.
Oh, absolutely, Jeff. It's interesting. A lot of people listening to this will absolutely never be able to fathom a 21% interest rate.
Oh
I
no,
mean,
no.
that's credit card stuff. I mean, that's just, it's brutal. And, I think they've always lived in these single digit interest rates. And, they just never even fathomed that that was something that was possible. I mean, money has been so, I don't know if cheap is the right word, but so reasonable, that the interest rates have been so reasonable for so long that I just don't think people really understand that. I mean, I think my first mortgage, was probably, 6 or 7% at most,
Yeah, and
and
that's high. Yeah,
high today. Yeah, absolutely.
mortgages were 18% back then. So
Wow.
not only did our cost of borrowing go up, but our business absolutely died because nobody's building any houses.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say your
Well,
contractors couldn't have been busy, and nobody, they couldn't have afforded to run their lines of credit as well. I mean, it's
yeah,
just such a killer when that happens, when those interest rates get in there. But you weather through, and as you said, 9 months of education right there.
yeah,
It's a quickie. So
yeah,
yeah, it's interesting. You said, going into the family business in fourth grade. I can certainly remember that, summers ceased to exist for me after eighth grade. That was the end of it. And, I think about my kids, my oldest is going into eighth grade, and I'm thinking, boy, I mean, how old is he now? You think about him actually going in and working on a daily basis.
yeah.
There's no way, I just don't see it. But, maybe he'll shock me. Who knows?
Well, when I was 12 years old, they used to give me all the cut pipe orders because, I knew how to run the pipe machine, the rigid pipe machine. I
Yeah.
cut and thread pipe, and, it's no big deal. Well, now, OSHA would,
Oh,
come in and jump all over you if you had a 12-year-old kid running the pipe machine.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, I think my brother, who still runs our family business, he couldn't hire his son until after he was 18, I believe. His
Wow.
insurance company just said no. And frankly, their preference was 21, but they don't want anybody younger than 20, in that working in that warehouse environment.
Uh,
Yeah, I learned to drive with a forklift. That's
oh,
how
did you
that was my first drive. Yeah, I used to drive forklift when I was a kid all the time.
really?
That's just the way it was. But no, it's a different environment for sure, and it'll be interesting to see. What that. If kids are going to be able to be brought into their businesses, I think it's kind of ironic, that kids can't come work and drive our forklifts or do things like that at
Yeah,
18, but yet we will allow them to drive tanks and things like that.
yeah,
We'll let
right.
them go into military service and drive much bigger, much more dangerous vehicles. And I'm thinking, can't we give them a little experience first, before we give them the big stuff? So
Yeah.
yeah, it is. It's an interesting deal. But that first recession that you went through, I mean, that recessionary period came out of that. There have been a few more in your career, though, definitely.
Oh, yeah. The latest one was 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was kind of an interesting. Every one of them has been a little bit different, and I think I've gone through four of them. Every one has been a little bit different. This one, the biggest problem we had was collecting. In 2008, we wrote off more debt than we did in the preceding 30 years. It must have been a lot harder on the contractors than previous recessions because we wrote off a lot of debt on that one. And really, that was the only we would have made money if it hadn't been for that. And that was one of the years that we lost money. I think it was 2009. So
Right.
interesting story. In 2008, I was president of ASA.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And, I was flying around the country, playing golf in all these places, giving speeches at conventions. And 2008 ended, and my term ended, and 2009 was a recession. And that year, I mean, we had to cut everything we could,
Yeah.
including people, anything that we didn't absolutely need, we cut it out, including our cleaning service. So we took turns cleaning the building, and I took a turn.
Yeah.
They had to clean the bathrooms. So 2008, here I am, ASA president, big shot of the industry, flying around the country, giving speeches at
Right.
conventions. And 1 year later, I'm cleaning my own toilets.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
Exactly.
If that don't make you humble, nothing does.
No kidding, man. It's funny. I was a president myself, back in '03 of my association. So I relate to you getting up in front of people, going around and doing that kind of deal. And it's funny, once you become a past president,
Yeah.
it's that, that badge and, $1.25 will get you a cheap cup of coffee, it's
Yep,
not, you
exactly.
just kind of laugh. You're like, hey, wasn't that. But
Yeah.
I think that's it's important, that service to the industry. I think that's something that's I feel very strongly about, and I know you do too. Could you tell me a little bit about your experience with that? Serving back to the industry.
Sure. Started out in our regional association, which at the time was CWA, which is now NCWA. So
Mm-hmm.
it was Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, Western Pennsylvania. And I started out on the board of directors, and they asked me to go through the chairs and become president.
Yeah.
So I did. And it was a great experience for a number of reasons. One is I met a lot of good people. And when you go to conventions, so much of the learning takes place, as Scott Weaver will say, in the hallway.
Yeah.
You learn
Yeah.
more in the hallway than you do in the classroom. In deference to you, who are one of those speakers,
Wait. You're wounding me, my friend.
we learn a little from you, but we learn a lot from each other.
Sure. No, I would agree
So
with that.
anyway, so I made a lot of good contacts and some good friends. But the thing that really helped our company was that because I was leadership of NCWA, I was on the ASA board, and I went to the ASA board meetings, and that's where I met Randy Tice. Randy Tice at the time was president of WIT, and
Sure, yeah,
and Randy's dad and my dad were friends from NHW, which is now Hardy.
okay,
And so Randy and I had a connection there. And we were talking one night, and I was talking about buying groups, because we were in a buying group that really wasn't doing us much good. And he said, you really ought to be in WIT. And 2 weeks later, Randy was in my office with the guy who was running WIT. They were in my office, and we ended up joining WIT, which ultimately saved our company. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the WIT buying group. So by serving on that trade association board, it led us to becoming part of WIT, which ultimately saved our company. So, there's the payback.
yeah.
Not only, everything else that I learned, and everybody else that I got to hang out with, you hang out with some mighty fine people. And it really saved our company, because without that, we wouldn't have been here today.
It's interesting, Jeff. I was just thinking about, those relationships that you build. And I can remember when I went through the board seats to eventually become president of the association I was involved with. I literally had an interview yesterday with one of the guys that was on the board with me.
Oh, yeah.
And he and I have been friends for decades and decades now, and it was just like, man, these professional relationships that you build and you go through in that industry service. I mean, it's pretty incredible stuff, it's pretty special stuff. And, I think it's important that you can lean on those relationships, during tough times.
Yeah. Jim Grady was the guy.
Jim Grady. Okay.
Yeah.
I never met Jim. Charlie was my exposure. Charlie was my the guy I knew at WIT, and really a terrific fellow. But you had mentioned it's kind of a bold statement that, WIT saved your company. Tell me about that a little bit. How did the buying group save your company? I mean, what were some of the big things that you got that really changed Mid-City?
Well, the most obvious is the better buying, the rebates that we got. And then when Randy was president, they came up with a program like a 27 points of grading your company. Do you do this?
Oh, interesting.
Do
Okay.
that, do this? And, a lot of people thought it was a pain in the ass, but it was all good stuff. It was all things that, you necessarily didn't like the answers to the questions,
right.
But they were good questions, and it were things that you really needed to think about. So just that kind of thing is helping us learn how to do what we do better. learn how to look. It's like with your golf swing, you can't know the problems with your golf swing unless you can see yourself on video and actually
Right.
see what it looks like. This made us take a look at ourselves in a different viewpoint and made us a better company.
Yeah, it's interesting because those are things, as you said, a lot of people don't like to do. And I think a lot of it is because, the general nature of these privately held distribution companies is that they are sales entities, and the leadership tends to be from a sales standpoint. They don't like to look at that stuff. That's not fun. And especially if there are some glaring areas of concern, they'd rather do the ostrich thing, and just, hope that the trouble passes them by. So no, it's a good exercise to get into.
And we're as guilty of that as anybody. We are a sales organization, and the sales is the easy part.
Totally.
It's all the other stuff that makes it tough.
Well, as I'm an old Gordon Graham disciple, and Gordon, he had said that, it's distributors do not go out of business because of lack of sales. It's because they run out of cash. They can't manage their cash. So the selling, as you said, is easy. It's that cash management and those financials and the things that you don't like to look at. That's what kills good, distributorships.
Oh, there was a very successful company in Witt that they were in North South Carolina, somewhere back down there. And their bank was sold, and the new bank did not want to continue the relationship, called the note, and they were out of business.
Yep.
And everybody was shocked that that was the case. But yeah, another thing, you talk about associations. One of the other things that I did early in my career was ASA started the Young Execs program, which is now called the Emergent Leaders.
Sure.
Young Execs had a ski trip to Vail, and I went and didn't know anybody. And on that ski trip, I met Scott Weaver, who has become a lifelong friend. And I'm sure you know Scott.
I know Scott.
And,
sure. Yeah.
Of course, Scott is the ultimate of teachers. He is a brilliant guy. And he shares a lot of his knowledge. Sometimes even when you don't want to hear about it, but you better edit that part out. But Scott is a great guy, and I learned a lot from Scott. And of course, Randy is his father-in-law. So there was a great connection there. But I can remember some long nights talking about things with Scott Weaver.
It's interesting you say that. So my association also had these regionals. We didn't have an emerging leaders program, but we had these regional meetings, and they were ski trips. I mean, basically, they call it, and Vail and, Jackson Hole, all these different places. Well, my current business partner, again, in Marshall Jones, that's where he and I met at those trips. So Marshall and I know each other, better part of 25 years, and it's because of that association. And, ultimately, probably, 15, 20 years after our meeting is when we actually finally, decided to actually do some business to, work together going forward. But we remained friends, very similar to you and Scott. And it's just, it is pretty amazing. And those are things that, if we did not raise our hand, or if we didn't show up, we wouldn't have had that opportunity. I mean, it just wouldn't have been there. So, going back to the buying groups, and it's interesting how you found Witt through your association with ASA. I found that a lot of trade association execs, and maybe it's getting better now, but they've had this adversarial relationship or this negative look at the buying groups, competitive or something. I don't understand that mentality.
Well, I think it has to do with time. You can only go to so many meetings a year, and the buying group meetings, it's pretty much required that you are there.
Right.
Both by rules and by just the fact that you need to be there because you're meeting with so many of your vendors and everything.
Correct.
And in my case, I can tell you that I used to go to 2 conventions a year, ASA and Hardy. And now, because there's 2 buying group meetings, I just go to ASA.
Yeah.
And we have somebody else that goes to Hardy. So you're competing with people both for time and for all the other things. And I think time has become such a commodity, such a precious commodity for all of us because we're all so busy. So I think that that's where the adversarial relationship comes in. But I don't think it's necessarily a good thing. And I think that when I was in the leadership of ASA, we were trying to make inroads with the buying groups to eliminate that adversarialness. and try to partner with them. And I think they've come some way in doing that.
It's interesting. I had that conversation with Mike Adeleze, and
I hired him.
hey, you know what? Heck of a hire, Jeff. I mean, I think Mike is fantastic. I get along with him so well.
Yeah, my wife hired him.
Oh, you really? Oh, that's funny.
It was a great story. We were in Chicago doing interviews, and Eileen was there with me, and we had some kids that lived there at the time, and she was coming back from meeting with one of the kids that was in the hotel, and Mike was sitting in the hallway, and before she came into the room, because we were interviewing somebody else, she had a conversation with Mike, and she said, "You really ought to hire this guy. He's really good." And then we had the meeting with Mike, and we ended up hiring him. And I saw him first.
Yeah, that's my hire. Yeah. Well, absolutely congratulate her on that one. Mike and I have had a great relationship over the years. And, it's interesting, Mike, when we talked a little bit about buying groups, he's got a very different approach. He is more, I guess, along the lines of trying to bring them in or to find ways to bring the two together. He doesn't see them as that adversarial or competitive. He really sees them more as an ally working with members. And really, if you look at it, the two have very different roles and very different responsibilities and charges.
They're complementary for sure.
I think so. No, I would agree. So I really hope, I guess my hope in talking about this is that some association execs will realize that they don't have to be enemies. They don't have to, badmouth the other one. It's, hey, embrace these folks. They can really, help your association. Yeah, it has been an interesting journey though. And, I haven't grilled Talbot yet on his relationship with them yet, but I'll get him. I'm going to go after him and I'll find out where he's at on it. But I think you've got, the two associations you're very involved, that you've been involved with over the years, really, top-notch associations and have, been terrific to work with over the year, in my career. So nice. So, you were second generation, well, kind of second generation, because it's almost like, you and your dad bought it back together. So you kind of, I don't know if I could call you second generation. I guess it kind of a little bit, but this next generation is coming in. Your family is involved. Jordan, Dan, and I'm sorry, is there other siblings involved in the company as well?
We have one other son, Seth, and he is not involved. He works for Dr. Pepper, actually.
Maybe the smart one of the group, I guess. Decided you looked at the family business and I don't know.
On any given day, it could go either way.
Absolutely. At least at family gatherings, you don't get caught into the family business. So if you wouldn't mind, could you tell me a little bit about that transition and how you kind of, first of all, how long have the boys been in the business? I mean, how long have they been involved?
Well, again, they worked summers during high school and college. All three of them did. Yeah. Dan has been here for 10 years and Jordan seven, I think.
Okay.
And it might be 11 and 8. I'm not sure, but
sure,
about that long. And recently they bought me out, the two of them.
Yeah.
And so now they are the owners and I work at their mercy. Yep. And of course, the question was who's going to become president. And I said, I'm not going to make that decision. The two of you can decide. And they had made a decision. And I heard the Allen brothers, who are the co-presidents of Sloan Valve Company, they spoke at Notre Dame a few years ago, the Notre Dame's MBA school. And I went and it was open to the public, so I went and listened to them. And they talked about being co-presidents and how that's all working and why they did it and everything. And I thought, you know what, that's something that we should look at. So I shot the idea to Dan and Jordan. I said, let's think about this, because I thought that, if one of them is president, the other one is vice president, it really doesn't really reflect on their ownership and all that. So we talked about it and we called Kirk Allen, and he was very upfront and open about sharing both the advantages and the disadvantages and the traps to watch out for of being co-president. And Dan and Jordan decided to become co-presidents. And we're going to go that way in a month or two. I'm going to step down as president and they're going to become co-presidents. So, and they both have their separate areas. Jordan is more the sales and operations and Dan is more the administrative side. And I think it'll work really, really well.
I've had the pleasure of working with both boys, for the last, gosh, it's been probably 2 or 3 years at least, and really kind of seeing, where it is interesting, that you mentioned sales and operations, for Jordan. And many people would say, well, wouldn't it be sales and marketing? But, Dan really took that marketing side as well. So it's kind of an interesting, mix there.
Yeah, it is an interesting mix. And, Dan is going to run the marketing. And that's good because has to work closely with sales. Actually, Jordan is doing more operations. We have an outsider, Joe Velleman, who has really become part of the.
I know Joe well. Sure,
yeah,
sure.
Joe has been a real asset to us, and I call him my fourth son, I guess. I don't know. So the three of them, I'm very confident in their ability to run this company for the long term.
Yeah, I like the dynamic of those three. And again, I've had the privilege of, spending some time with the three of them and listening to that dynamic and see how that goes. And it'll be interesting to see how a co-presidency works. I mean, I've seen, my brother and I looked at that. That was actually something that we had talked about and discussed, and ultimately decided that we probably were not going to be great business partners together. That was not going to be a good fit for us. And so I chose another path. But we did look at that. I saw one that I thought was really going to work out well, and it's actually in your industry. But ultimately, they started out fairly well, and then it just did not work very well. So, hopefully this can come together well, and hopefully this can, they can find ways to complement one another. And I think that's really checking the ego a lot. I think that's going to be a big piece of it.
If I'm reading between the lines, I think you're saying good luck with that.
Well, I think that you all have a good shot at it because I again, looking at both of them, and again, with Joe complimenting, I think you've got different areas of skill and interest that can be worked with. And I think it's possible, I can't speak to the personal relationship between everyone, but I think from a professional standpoint, I've seen some good possibilities that this could work. I mean, I have to tell this story. I hate to say this, Jeff, but I've seen, oh my God. So I saw a really horrible one. It was a good friend of mine, actually. I met through the buying group I was involved with. And he was the president of their company. And the parents still owned the stock, but he was the president of the company. He had two siblings in the company. But he'd always been the face. He always went to the buying group meetings. He was always the face of the organization. And really, they had thrived. I mean, they were doing pretty darn well. And when the parents passed, the stock went into the boys' names equally. Everybody got a third. And want to talk about the worst thing that could ever happen to a company? I mean, that is it right there. I mean, it was awful. What happened was, with each of them having a third, the other two siblings said, well, why do you get to be president? And I think they're still operating this way today. And it's terrible. Every year, one of the siblings takes the presidency. So they have a rotating president every year. And the continuity of that company has gone horribly astray. They can't make money. It's not a good situation. The original president actually reached out to me and said, can you come down and talk to us about this and see if I can talk some sense into us? And I said, absolutely. I'm more than happy to do that. But you have to have your brother's permission to let me come down. And they didn't want anything to do with me. So they said, no, we don't want to listen to this. Yeah. So it's tough to see that.
Yeah. I don't think that'll happen with us.
I don't think so either. No, I think so. Well, and also they made a conscious decision to buy the company together, from right. you. And so, no, I think that's a really, it's a good one. Well, you're scheduled to retire here in a little bit. Now what? At least you said you are. Yeah, that's the thing, Jeff. That's hard to do. You've been running this company since you said 79, I believe. It's a tough transition. What do you plan to do with yourself?
I don't know. Are you looking for a partner?
Maybe so. You never know. You can come out and peddle advice like myself.
I'd love to do that. I could go to conventions and speak. I love doing that stuff.
It's it is a lot of fun. I will tell you, the downside is getting on airplanes right now. It is not as much fun as it once was. Yeah. That's a little bit of a challenge. So,
well, Jason, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm sure that I will find things to do.
Yeah.
Everybody that I've talked to that is retired, they say, "Oh yeah, we're busy all the time." So yeah, some volunteer work. Hey, I may get a job at the local Ace Hardware store, just to keep myself busy.
Sure.
Definitely will not go to Home Depot though, but
No orange apron for you. So
there's another piece for you to edit out. We want to do some traveling. We have a place in Arizona, and I did spend 2 months there in the winter. It was kind of my trial retirement, as they say,
yeah.
and it worked out really well. I did attend a number of meetings by Zoom and still kept in touch, and I had my computer there, and so I was still working somewhat. But I like to do things around the house. Maybe I'll finally get to work on that golf game that's been so lousy the last 40 years.
I think mine's never going to get fixed. I tell you, it just is what it is. So I might as well just enjoy it.
My dad was a great golfer, and I'm not, but all my kids are. And Jordan once told me that it appears that the golfing gene skips a generation.
Oh, it's funny. My grandfather was a very good golfer. He was a semi-pro golfer, and the gene just didn't hit me at all. It might hit my brother, but it just didn't hit me. So my dad and anything. So. Well, hey, Jeff, I really appreciate you taking the time, to speak with me today and to, share with me, some of the things that are going on, in your company, and, absolutely wish you the best. I'm going to be spending more time around your company. So I'll probably, our paths will cross, but, it's just, as I said, it's been a pleasure catching up.
Thanks. I appreciate you asking me to do this, because this has been a great industry for me, and it has really done a lot for me. And, I've spent my whole life here, and anything I can do to give back to the industry, if something I said sparks a note in someone who hears this and helps them do better or improve their lives, then we've accomplished something. It is a great industry. I always tell everybody that nobody ever leaves this industry. They start out as a contractor, and then they go to a wholesaler, or they're a rep and they go to a manufacturer, or from one manufacturer to another. Steve Embry came in my office, and he was with Elkhart for years and years. And now I can't remember, Gerber or something. I can't remember. Yeah. But nobody ever leaves this industry. And I always say it's kind of like the mafia. The only way out is
right. That's it. I agree.
But, it's a great industry, and people, if they leave, they come back. I love this industry. It's awesome. And so anything I can do to help somebody is great. So
fantastic, Jeff. Again, thanks for taking the time, and I look forward to catching up soon.
Okay. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.